freedom camping bylaw. Good question. We shall get volume for you, sir. Perhaps if I put my mouth closer to the microphone, that would help as well.
I don't think the speakers in the back are actually working at the moment.
Can you hear me now? Oi! Beauty, fantastic. Look, lights, camera, action. I shall declare the meeting open. Just for your information, this meeting is live streamed via YouTube and will be available online afterwards. If I can please look at the first order of business, it's apologies. I have received apologies from Mayor Brownless, and I would, Councillor Baldock, you have to leave at a certain time.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. As you know, I've got leave to attend my son's wedding, so I have to exit about 1:30. But assure the submitters that with the benefits of modern technology, I'll be able to watch on the YouTube channel and catch up to all the submissions that have been made.
Thank you, Councillor Baldock, and I'm going to ask also, I've got apologies from Councillor Clout and Malloy for lateness. Can I please have somebody move those apologies? Moved by Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Mason. I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. We have one item of business which is going to take us the majority of this afternoon. Then we will adjourn for tomorrow morning. Again, the second round of submissions. But before that, Councillor Brown is going to complete the previous committee towards the end of the day. So we've got DC 54, which is simply a motion to receive the submissions that we have in our agenda and also the oral submissions given to us today. Can I please have a mover of A and B that we receive those submissions? Moved by Councillor Mason, seconded by Councillor Brown. Any discussion? No, I'll put that. All those in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. Okay, to our submitters, our first submitter is Derek Shepherd. Thank you for your patience, sir. You have 10 minutes. The floor is yours for that time to use as you see fit. If you do finish earlier, there may be the opportunity for my colleagues to ask questions, though, at the end. So over to you, sir.
Good afternoon. Thank you very much. You should all have a copy of my submission, so if you would perhaps like to just read it. Then, if you wish, you can come straight back to me with questions and I'll enlighten you as best I can.
Okay, colleagues, we've been given the request to read the submission in front of us. It's this item here. I'll give you a couple of minutes to read that, and once that time has elapsed, then we can have some questions.
My main concern is the designated spots, because at the moment many of them do not fit standard motorhomes. You may get one of these small converted vans, many of which probably will eventually lose their self-containment licenses anyway because they're too small, and at the moment you cannot fit the right number of full-scale motorhomes into the spaces. Plus the fact there is no line marking, so you get people keep on parking in the wrong places, which doesn't let the full number in. Then somebody comes along and there's a big argument because they don't want to move and they can't get in. There was a particular problem, I'm afraid, with Sulphur Point, because that space was reduced to make room for the disabled, for which I have no problem, but it meant that you could only fit safely 2 units in, whereas the notice and our app says, I mean Motor Caravan Association's app says that you could fit 3, and there have been numerous occasions when small vans have turned up 8, 9 o'clock at night, desperate for somewhere to stay, no mood to be turned away, and it leads to some rather nasty incidents.
Derek, question from me. A lot of camper vans have gas bottles, and obviously there is a minimum area that you need to safely store a gas bottle.
Yes.
What is that area? I mean, how far away from another van do you need to park, you know, in terms of health and safety with your gas bottle in one van and another one?
Well, I'm not an expert on the gas regulations of New Zealand, but I can only use the Motor Caravan Association's recommendation, and it is one that we have to stick to whenever we use one of their sites, and that is a space of 3 metres between each unit.
Thank you. Colleagues, any questions of Derek relating to his submission? No? Are there any further verbal points that you wish to raise at this time?
Well, I do notice that the sites that you've decided to give extra space to, I tried to look them up on our app and found virtually no comments. So this would suggest that my association rarely uses those spaces, but you are, of course, taking away places where, if you went into our app, you would find a whole long column of comments praising them and saying how wonderful they are. But unfortunately, if the motion as it stands is passed, we will be losing them.
Councillor Mason.
Yeah, thank you very much, Derek. Sorry, Mr. Shepherd. Have you used
Derek will do.
the Campermate app? Is just one that a lot of the other freedom campers use.
What other people use, I don't know. As a member of the Motor Caravan Association, we have our own app, and I use that, and it's very accurate.
Okay, thank you for your... Oh, yes, Councillor Baldock.
Yes, Derek, I note your comment about Omanu Surf Club. It is a beautiful spot.
Oh, it's a fantastic spot.
But I think the reason it's being withdrawn is in relationship to the Omanu Surf Club and, you know, all of their usage. But I note most of the camper vans always go right down the very end of the car park. If that was the designated spot and there is enough, I mean, you've got problems turning because it's so busy in the summer. In the winter it should not be a problem. Would you be open to a seasonal ban on that and still being allowed to use it in the winter time?
If there is no other choice, that is better than nothing, but I agree that is a very small park and it is very heavily used. And I have, when I ever have used it, I have always been at the very far end. If I have just an odd minute, just to sort of make it clear, you probably wonder, as a local, why am I using so many of your facilities? The reason is that I came to this country to help out with grandchildren that were stuck between a very acrimonious divorce with my wife, and in the process had to sacrifice having my own home. I now live in a house where there are 3 children and 5 adults, so our camper van is used, or motorhome is used, as a space to get us away from time. Not that we don't get on, but we like our own space occasionally.
Well,
thank you very much for listening.
Councillor Brown, sorry, one further.
This is a question probably to you, Derek, but also perhaps to the people in the room that are also homeowners. You've raised the issue, motor homeowners, you've raised the issue around fire safety, and that is of a concern. It isn't part of your self-containment to carry a fire extinguisher, but generally do you all carry fire extinguishers anyway? Can I just ask the people in the room, if you own a motorhome, do you carry your own fire extinguisher? Fantastic, thank you.
Thank you for the submission, Mr. Shepherd. It's been received and we will be deliberating in May.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, colleagues, our next speaker is Mr. Alan Dale from the Caravan and Camping New Zealand, and he has tabled this item here with a picture of the caravan on the top. Mr. Dale, the next 10 minutes are yours to use as you see fit, but if we finish within that time, then there may be an opportunity for my colleagues to ask some questions.
You can hear me better now. That's good. Yeah. Basically, I just came here to have a chat with you all and and pass on my thoughts on everything of the overall picture of the proposed bylaw. I'm actually here to help you fellas in any way I can. I've given out some samples of a little booklet that the Wairoa District Council have put out. I'm hoping that you fellas go far enough forward to do something similar. But as I said, that's fine on it. There is a difference between self-contained and freedom camping. The self-contained campers have to be within 50 metres of a 24-hour toilet block. And another item I have noticed on some of the vehicles that you see in the parks, the actual self-contained sticker on the back, anyone can go and buy one of those, it's no problem on that. But the card that fits in the door, according to the standards, it's got to be printed and it tells you the size of the lettering and everything else on it and what type of font to use. I see some of them are coming out with the handwritten signs on them. So how legal they are, they're not up to the standard. So that's the start on that lot, right. The next thing sort of general I've got on there is the minimum number of vans that you have in the various parking areas. Now all I can do there is give you an idea on an experience I had. I took a group of vans, we did a roving rally and finished up at the Waiuku College. It was actually over just after Christmas, over New Year. We spent about 10 days there and they were charging us a minimal amount, but with that period of time it actually mounted up to, we were going to give them a cheque for just on $1,000. But as I was leaving I said, well, I haven't got the chequebook with me, we'll post it up to you. The caretaker have said to me straight away, don't worry about it, he says, you've saved us $30,000 this year, because the vandals that come into the place and that have been damaging it every year and the damage. So it meant that even though we were sort of using their amenities, we were actually working for them as well to actually contain it. So that gives me the incentive to thinking about it, to up the number of people, of vans you have in the various areas, to make it more security for the vans and more security for the area where they are parking up and everything like that. So that's, as I said, just from my experience. Another thing I do is, my van has got an overhang close to 2 metres at the back of it. And when I go in, if I go into a car park, it's a just over 7 metre van, that'd be poking out 7 metres. But if I back in over the grass, without going up onto the grass, it brings it down to 5 metres that I stick out. And that makes a big difference to the traffic in front of me and everything like that. So the area behind, leave it in a garden type, pebbles or whatever. When I say pebbles, wooden little plants and that, so that you can back over it, and that'll give you a bit more area out the front. Now the next thing is, I'm very people orientated, so when your chief comes along to sort out these overparks and everything else like that, I suggest they go up and talk to them and give them the opportunity to get out of here or whatever. It's basically their feelings towards the council and that would probably be better if they are talked into leaving, rather than there's a fine $200 and it gives the council a very bad reputation. Yeah. So that's just a little bit of public relations. The next little bit I've got on there is some of the grounds that get hired here for a different show or a thing, we're not allowed to camp on it overnight, yet they will bring in a whole heap of gear. It might be in the vicinity of, say, $10,000 worth of gear. There's no storage there to hide that gear overnight, but we're not allowed there to stay there to secure the site, as it were. We'd like it that the contestants or the people running the show could camp in it. With those sort of shows, we do supply toilets if there's none on the place, so that there's no problem with that or anything like that. And we are there with the idea in the back of our mind, leave it as we found it or better than when we found it. So we do go around like that. We would get more visitors coming to the shows, which would bring a little bit more pocket money into us fellas around town too. Yeah, okay. The next one I had was the Cliff Road car park. It's already got a sign, has it, to say that it's limited to the light vehicles or not? I'm not sure on that. In the one of the forms, it did say that it already had that on it, but I'm not sure on that. Would it be more practical to put on a sign to say that with a 3.5 tonne limit is easy to do, in as much as if they've got a warrant of fitness, they're under the 3.5 tonne. If they've got a certificate, they're over it. And that's the easiest way to police their weights on it for you. That's just another suggestion. And I also put on it, if it's the grass that gets soft, you could put it on not on the grass, or even in certain times of the year not on the grass. Like the grass down Sulphur Point, you can park on that without damaging it, but the ones down, or I was going to say up there, Park or Forrepy Road there, that might get a bit soft if you got on that grass. So it's according to the things. And that's the other one I thought of, where you do have them parked in a sealed area. The average motorhome would probably be 7 to 7.5 metres. There's some that are 10, some of them are 6, but probably the medium is around about 7 to 8 metres. So where there's areas like that, allow when you mark it to have a vehicle that long on it, right? I see I've got 2 minutes left. Have anyone got any questions for me?
Questions, colleagues? Councillor Mason.
Yeah.
Well, Alan, it's lovely to see you again.
Yeah.
I've seen Alan for probably at least 10 or 15 years.
Yeah.
Alan used to be the water advisor,
Yeah.
or water restrictions, etc. So lovely to see you again.
Yeah.
Alan, my question is, do you, in regards to the markings of the Freedom Camping bays at the moment, how do you think, are those clear cut to you, or just we've heard some some people say that they're not that clear. What's your, as the president, what sort of feedback are you getting from your members?
My feelings on that is the markings that I've seen, and I don't go around our local ones very much, but the markings I've seen is they are painted in yellow for where you go, and if they're not yellow, you don't go. So if it's to publicise that more, probably to get more people to know it. I feel that, yes, do keep it like that. As it's sort of mentioned, if you can allow the 3 metres between them, the average car park is 3 metres wide, isn't it? It means that the 2 vans, they take up close to the whole car park, but there would be room in between for a little car to go through or park there if it got overcrowded, but it still gives that bit of area to for the safety on the gas bottle is the main one. Yeah.
Sorry, Sultan, just for your information, they're green. They've got the hatched green signs painted on the top.
All right.
Yeah.
I didn't realise I'm colourblind, actually. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Dale. Through myself to staff, in terms of parking on reserves when there is an event and the motorhomes are going and parking there as part of the event but not allowed to stay overnight, is that something that is a prohibition under the reserves management plan, or is it something we have flexibility on?
Combination. Under the Reserves Act, under our reserve management plan, we revert back to our bylaw that dictates where freedom camping can occur. So to do that, we would need to get minister approval for freedom camping to occur on that, which can be delegated to the CE. There's a process in place for it. So it's things we can do.
Thank you, Mr. Dale,
Yeah.
for that. Your submission will be considered and
Yeah.
we'll be deliberating in May. We'll
Yeah.
let you know what the date is when we get to it.
Yeah, I
So
see
thank you for your
my
submission.
time's up, but I'm actually representing Caravanning Camping New Zealand, which is a laid-back sort of parent body of a lot of little caravan clubs around the country, very people-orientated, all volunteers, no money gets paid anywhere. It's an incorporated society. Oh, yeah, and he knows the van that I used to drive around, and it was a bit smaller than a camper van. It was the little one with the tap on the roof. The snail, yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Have fun.
Our next speakers are Keith and Christine Carter, and their submission is on page 43 of your agenda. Welcome, thank you. Like I've said to the previous speakers, this 10 minutes is your time to address us on the topic as you see fit, and if you do finish earlier, then perhaps my colleagues may like to ask some questions. So thank you, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Just to introduce ourselves, we're ratepayers in Tauranga. We've had properties in Tauranga for over 20 years, but we're also full-time motorhomers who we've been full-time motorhoming now for 26 years, 14 years overseas, and the rest of the time back here, 12 years back in New Zealand. Now, our work takes us throughout New Zealand, but we often come back into Tauranga to do business, see our lawyers, do banking, shopping, visit friends, family, and some of these properties that we visit, we can park with our 8-metre motorhome on their premises. Others, we're parking outside. Now, this has never been an issue for anybody. We've never had a complaint about that. So, you know, my concern is that if there's...
Sorry, just a technical issue, just one mic at a time, is that all right? Yeah, apologies, sorry, that's just
Getting a
our
bit of
issue.
echo there, are we? Yeah. Yeah, so my concern, as I read the proposals for this freedom camping thing, is to restrict vehicles parking on the street in different areas. Now, you know, we've just been in the industrial area to get some work done on our Iveco, and it's a 2-year-old motorhome, so it's it's a significant investment for us. It's almost the cost of a house. So my concern is that possibly we won't be able to park in some of these places. Now, some of the allocated places have been in a convenient spot because we don't tow a little car to then go and buzz around. We don't have e-bikes on the back of it. And as I say, our business takes us all over New Zealand, and we do shows and presentations throughout the country. Now, there's always, there's been allocations. Obviously, there's taxi stands, there's bus stops, there's handicap parking, there's loading zones, but there's no way to park a motorhome. We've just been in Gisborne. You go to the local supermarket, they've got allocated motorhome parking spots. We've just been in Whakatane. They've got allocated motorhome spots and overnight spots, almost right in the centre of town. Now, for us, it would be really nice, possibly for you people, just to have a little vacation in a motorhome and walk in our shoes for a while and try and find a place to park in some of these places without having to park miles away and to do what you need to do. So it's already been addressed, some of the size of the places that we've noticed in Tauranga to park. In Whakatane, the spaces are 9 to 10 metres long and 5 metres wide where there's parking is. So there's ample parking for those motorhomes, although it is restricted in numbers. So if you are thinking of, designing a spot for a motorhome, just to bear that in mind, to have, a reasonable place to park. Throughout the country, we've all been grouped into this thing of, freedom campers and all sorts of other names attached to that for the problems that they've concerned. But we are part of the Motorhome Association. There's a standard, a code of ethics of behaviour within the Motorhome Association, and we abide by that. whenever we stop anywhere, we pick up the paper. We actually clean our spot and make it better. But what we have noticed sometimes in Tauranga is that you have people pulling up in their cars, just throwing their rubbish straight out the door, and there might be a bin right in front of them. We've noticed also there seems to be an increasing number of homeless people living in cars and even in some of the bushes around Tauranga. And I think this, for the general populace, it gives the impression that we're all part of the same group thrown in together of these, pesky people who are living in cars. There is the commercial aspect of the small rental vehicles, where they're actually, I've heard, are penalised for using their toilet. Okay, there's a seal on their toilet, and if they use their toilet, they lose their bond. Now, these toilets in these small vehicles are not accessible at night when they're sleeping. So, really it is a bit of a joke. It would be nice if there was a card that could be read by a reader that security people could have, like it had a barcode, and it could tell you exactly whether what this vehicle is self-contained and whether it's certified and legal. So that would be a great moving forward. It might address some of these issues about legality of a lot of the vehicles. So this is my question to you about just bearing in mind how difficult it is for us to work and do what we need to do in some of the cities. Obviously, Tauranga is a growing and burgeoning place, and there's pressure on everything. Pass over.
Many years back, I was Vice President of the Chamber of Commerce here in Tauranga. I don't recognise many faces here, but we've all got older, obviously. But one of the things that I don't know whether everybody really recognises with us motorhomers, you call it freedom camping, and a lot of the attitude is, why don't you just go into a campground? The reality is we don't like being in campgrounds, especially in high peak season, because you have those slidey vans right next to you and you don't get much sleep, and it costs us $40 a night or more, and that works out for us about $10,000 a year, which is a bloody good overseas trip. But more importantly, we can actually go to one of your cafes, because as you can tell, Sam and I go to the cafes too often, but we actually spend our money somewhere else. And so as a council, as people that are looking at money being spent in your area, it is a very important consideration. And the motorhome friendly towns that really make you feel welcome is where we spend our money. And we're not unusual now. We've got 80,000 members of the Motorhome Association throughout the country, and a huge percentage of them are now starting to be like us, that are full-time on the road. And so you want to shop in a place that's friendly. Like, as I say, we've just been in Whakatane. They've got areas there where you can easily park and you can do all your shopping. Tauranga is impossible. And you have a few malls, but they're kind of hideous as well. So it's just something to consider, that providing that motorhome friendly attitude we spend money. The little van guys, whole different ball game. They're not spending a whole lot, and they do make a mess because they can't eat their food inside their little van. They have to do it outside, and that's what I know the local public get really frustrated with. So do we. We don't want to turn up to a place and you've just got all these little vans with everybody got their tables out and their chairs out, and a big huge mess happening constantly. But we don't fit into that category. We're Kiwis, we're here all the time. But yes, I'd be horrified if I wasn't able to park outside my sister's house and sleep there for the night if we've been in for an evening meal. And most times now, if we've been for an evening meal with her, which is the only time we catch up with her, is we can't get into Culham or Ferguson anymore because it's always full. And so we end up kind of going, where the hell do we stay? And we're local. We actually pay rates here.
Just the other thing, at the height of the season, the campgrounds are full anyway, so it is very difficult to get in. They can accommodate far more smaller vehicles than they can larger vehicles like ours. We're also members of the Waihi RSA, we're members of Kaikoui Golf Club, we're members of the Pohara Boat Club. So we have association members, and we enjoy the benefits of those associations. And it's one place that we do get to park in some of these places and have the room. Do you have any questions for us?
Thank you. Colleagues, Councillor Malloy has a question. Councillor Malloy.
It finishes up with a question through the chair. There's a fair amount of sympathy in this in the council for the position that you folk find yourselves in. I had a camper van and I took it right around Australia, did 30,000 k's. Had an absolutely fantastic time there. Stopped almost anywhere we wanted, but it's a much bigger country and much more open. And done a fair amount in New Zealand too. But our big problem here in the city and in other cities is there's a huge build-up of tourism, and the camper vans are coming thick and fast. And though we do not want to stop anybody from that freedom of just going somewhere in our country and going to the bush, camping or parking overnight, so long as you're self-contained, I'd hate to see that stopped because it's part of our way of life. But we do have a problem, and it's going to get bigger and bigger all the time. The freedom campers, who are not you guys, I understand, are creating problems. But so we need to be able to work very, very closely. The councils around the country with your parent organisation. So the question is, I'm sure the Motorhome Association is, but we need to actually work more closely with the various councils to find a way through this difficulty that we've got. And I'm certain there will be an organisational representative here today. Or do you represent the organisation as well, or just yourselves?
No, we don't represent the organisation.
Okay. Well, I guess I'll direct that question to the organisation later.
Yeah. Just if I may just close with one thing. In a couple of the other councils, during the peak times, have put aside or used a larger area of space, reasonably close to the city, and just put a few toilets and a water supply, and been able to park a significant number of vehicles. I know Nelson did that down by the airport, and a few of the other councils have done it just to cope with that, peak period during the summer. And there could be a donation area, whether you just pay donation or a suggested fee to save having somebody there policing it. So possibly just throw that in there as a possibility.
Thank you for your submission, Mr. and Mrs. Carter. We'll be deliberating on it in May, so we'll advise you of the date so you can listen in. But thank you for coming in. Our next speaker is Daryl Fletcher, and Daryl's submission is on page 32 of our agenda. Thank you, Mr. Fletcher. You've got 10 minutes to use as you see fit, and if you finish earlier, there may be an opportunity for some questions from my colleagues. Thank you.
Thank you. I oppose the draft freedom camping bylaws as notified. I understand the legal requirement of the council to provide sites under an act that I see as a bit of piecemeal knee-jerk legislation. And I feel these draft bylaws fit in the same scheme as the act as piecemeal and knee-jerk. I understand the popularity of this type of tourism. I believe the economic benefits of freedom camping are greatly overstated, but I accept there are some benefits of this activity. And I guess I've read the other submissions, and there's a group in favour and a group against, and against council can take some solace that it may have got its drafts kind of right in that type of approach. But I think the problem with the draft bylaws is that it's an incremental approach, and as a result there's a lack of guidance from any properly considered policy document. And without a proper policy, we're going to have this piecemeal approach, and we're going to have both sides of the argument coming in saying this is right, this is wrong, and I don't like where you've done this, and I don't like why that's in there, or I do like this, and I don't like that. And that, to me, will result in poor outcomes and a compromise that no one is really satisfied with. And I'll give you an example from your own draft bylaws. The justification for removing some of the freedom camping sites at Ferguson Park. is because it's interfering with the parking requirements for soccer when that's on. Yet the same consideration hasn't been made for the adoption of the extension of Freedom Camping car parks at Cambridge Park, where it's right in the middle of the parking for the BMX track. And in fact, one of the parks there is so in the middle of the BMX track, it makes it almost impossible for legitimate users of the BMX ground to park on their site. It makes it very difficult for them to read their notice board, and you look at it and you go, what idiot actually decided to put that there right in the middle of that particular space? And I guess the BMX park does ring a bit of a bell with me, because I'm not part of the club, but I do. My daughter used to participate at the old place. They got kicked out of there to go to Cambridge Park, and the reason for getting kicked out of there was because where they were was going to be developed into parking, which I think is a perfect place for more freedom camping parks. But now that proposal has been put on hold while the council debates whether it's going to give the land to a commercial enterprise in the form of the University of Waikato. So it's kind of great when you see how these clubs have been treated in that respect, and more so in terms of these freedom camping bylaws. I strongly oppose the proposal to allow the Chief Executive to modify the bylaws without notification. And the reason I say this, I live in Churchill Road, some distance from the Domain, but when the One Love Festival is on and the wind blows from the east, I have to leave town because of the noise. Now, some council officer decided that that wasn't going to have an adverse effect on me, and I can understand council's processes enough to understand that the same type of consideration will be given to these types of events, and the justification for amending the bylaws without notification, particularly to allow parking and camping in residential streets, which once again I strongly oppose. And one of the main reasons for opposing it in residential zones is because we've had the little vans with the blue sticker on the back park out in front of our property, and we know that at night time they're not using the toilet in their van. They're coming out. We ring the council, complain. 2 or 3 hours later, the council will come. Normally after midday, by a representative of the security team, and they'll be asked to move on. But that's where my daughter parks the car, and as a resident, it's just a bit creepy, you know. You've got someone else living outside of you who's doing so illegally, and it takes a long time to get anything done. I also believe that the bylaws as drafted, and this is 25 years of legal experience coming to the fore here, is they're ambiguous, and they're resulting in some anomalies that would be rather unreasonable. For example, again in Churchill Road, there's a place called Churchill Park. Under proposed bylaws, a camper van could park in front of Churchill Road because it isn't directly in front of a residential property. But the road's so narrow that the property across the road, the residential house across the road, would be impacted by that. Yet further up the road, if it would be illegal to park in another house, you'd be further away from that house than you would be if you were parking legally down the road in Churchill Park. I don't feel that residential zones are an appropriate place to allow this sort of camping activity without a proper consent process, which if it was a private person doing it, it would be under the Resource Management Act as a result of resource consent. I also I believe that we should be looking better at our freedom camping. And the answer to the problems that we've heard today from the Freedom Camping Association alike is not to further encroach into the reserves of the citizens of Tauranga or to clutter our already burdened roads. I think you need to develop a proper policy and consultation with all interest groups. And it would be an expectation that such a policy would look at areas where freedom camping could be properly allowed for and decent infrastructure for this type of activity developed. The draft bylaws provide for just less than 96 sites. I think I counted 96. There are numerous developed areas under council control where some infrastructure and security would make far better freedom camping sites than piecemeal spots and popular reserves. And in my submission, I made examples like Bay Park, Dive Crescent, I've had Sulphur Point, the roadway along Sulphur Point, perhaps where the BMX club used to be on Sulphur Point. And also think consideration to the reserve by the pump station down at Takatumi Drive, where the infrastructure is clearly there and it's accessible, handy to town, handy to the amenities that people in Freedom Camping want to go and look at. These identified areas could accommodate more than the 96 sites that the current bylaws provide for. And with proper toilets and maybe shower facilities, waste disposal and securities, these could become the asset for both the city and the Freedom Campers that the association of the people who have heard previous to me have sought. And with this in mind, I just feel there'd be a far better spend of ratepayer money than the justification given, say, for the funds of the spend of the redevelopment of Phoenix Park. I would have much preferred to see it put into new facilities rather than glossing over an existing nice park, you know, with the concrete that we have. So that's all I have to say. Thanks. Happy to take questions.
Thank you for that submission, Mr. Fletcher. That's pretty clear. Any questions from my colleagues? There are no questions. Look, thank you very much, and we'll be deliberating on your submission in May. Thank you. The next submitter, colleagues, is James Emlock from the New Zealand Motor Caravan Association, and the association's submission is on page 49 of your agenda. Thank you, Mr. Emlock. I suspect you are well versed in council submission processes up and down New Zealand. So you have the next 10 minutes at your discretion, and if you finish earlier, my colleagues may wish to ask some questions. Over to you. Thank you.
Good afternoon, and thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to speak to the Council today. My name is James Imlack. I am speaking on behalf of the New Zealand Motor Caravan Association. By way of experience, I have probably, as you say, submitted on nearly every Freedom Camping bylaw in existence today, and I've been on numerous working groups, and I've helped a number of councils with their bylaw processes. I've also sat on Local Government New Zealand's working groups that looked at creating the Model Freedom Camping bylaw and the latest guidance around freedom camping management throughout New Zealand. I'm going to take it that our submission has been read and use my time this afternoon to go through three key areas of the proposal that we take some issue with. First being the ability for the council to change the location of a designated freedom camping parking site by resolution only. Secondly, the requirement for all motorhomes to stay parked within the designated parking site. And thirdly, the policy that would prohibit freedom camping directly outside a private residence. Fundamentally, we feel that the proposal read as a whole has an unnecessarily restrictive approach towards standard motorhomes and responsible campers in the type of vehicles that we expect the council wants to welcome to the district. Now, that said, we do appreciate and acknowledge that this is a complicated and very complex process, and that it isn't made easy in Tauranga, given the significant population growth that you were experiencing. And we also acknowledge that there are other aspects of the Council's freedom camping management regime that demonstrate the Council is trying to find pragmatic solutions towards dealing with freedom camping. For example, the way that you've exercised your delegated powers under the Reserves Act to make it easier for people to know where they can and cannot freedom camp. So the first issue that we have is the Council's ability to change the location of a designated freedom camping site by resolution. We do support the reasons behind this. Unfortunately, the bylaw isn't particularly clear as to what purposes the Council would want to use this provision for. And we have seen other local authorities use it as a way to try and severely restrict freedom camping in the future when they believe that the site is no longer suitable. And there is a risk here that you circumvent the requirements under the Freedom Camping Act. So having read the Council's statement of proposal, my understanding is that the purpose and scope of this provision is to allow the Council to relocate designated sites when an area has been upgraded or modified in any way. And for the avoidance of doubt, and particularly for those who read the bylaw in the future, we simply suggest that you make a note in your bylaw explaining that scope and purpose of that provision. The second issue, which has already been alluded to by previous submitters, is the requirement for all motorhomes to stay within a designated parking site. most of our members travel in standard sized motorhomes that are over 6 metres long. And I think you'll find through all the submissions that you've received on this bylaw that there are some practical challenges with that. It's very difficult for those people to be able to freedom camp in those designated areas and comply with the requirements of the council's bylaw. Most people want to comply with the bylaw, but through no fault of their own, there seems to be some technical breaches that the council deals with through what I would consider to be a strict enforcement regime. On numerous occasions, we have had members contact us unhappy about the fact that they've received a warning or infringement notice because they've just encroached on the nearby freedom camping site. And even though they have no material effect on the environment or those camping next to them, they are still subject to the provisions or the enforcement provisions under the Freedom Camping Act. Our suggestion, given the fact that the council is not going to deliberate on this bylaw until May, is for staff and councillors to meet with some of our members who are here today, go out to some of these sites where we do have some practical challenges of fitting a standard sized motorhome and see firsthand what those issues are. And through that process, you may be able to come up with some more practical options. The third issue that we have with the bylaw is the proposal to prohibit freedom camping directly outside a private residence within the 50-kilometre speed zone. To the best of my knowledge, no local authority in New Zealand has a broad brush prohibition such as this. I am only aware of one other local authority, that being the Waitaki District Council, who restrict freedom camping outside of residential homes. However, they permit that activity if the owners or occupiers of that home give permission to those freedom campers. So there is a possible solution here that the council could further explore that would allow people such as the previous submitters to continue to freedom camp outside the homes of their families and friends without causing any issues to the council or the local environment. It's very unclear to me why this broad brush policy is necessary, and I would invite the council to elaborate on it if they can today. So the two main issues that we have with the bylaw are around the inability for standard sized motorhomes to park in most of your designated areas, and the broad brush prohibition that applies directly outside of your private residence throughout Tauranga. Now, if you look at those two issues and combine them with the policies that already exist under your reserve management plans and district plan provisions, there is a really strong argument, in my view, that there's a virtual prohibition, or at the very least discrimination against your standard type of motorhome and their ability to be able to freedom camp in Tauranga. Now, we're not suggesting that that's the council's intention, but that's the practical effect of all the issues that we're talking about today. However, we think that if the council can meet with our members on site at some of those designated areas, look at those practical issues, and ease up on the prohibition that applies directly outside of private residence, you will go a long way to satisfying the concerns of at least 4,000 of our members who reside in Tauranga and the 87,500 members who enjoy freedom camping in your district every year. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Imlock. If you make, or your local representative makes contact with myself, I'll be able to liaise with them and organise a site visit of councillors who are available to visit and see some of the parking issues. Councillor Clout has a question.
Thank you very much, James. I've just gone on to the Motorhome Friendly Towns website, and obviously Tauranga is not featured there. So what are some of the key things that you'd like us to change with our proposed bylaw for us to actually get on to that particular website? I mean, the opposite of what you've been talking about, I assume.
Sure. So just very quickly, the Motorhome Friendly Towns scheme, one of the criteria is that you have a bylaw that more or less complies with the permissive premise of the Freedom Camping Act. So if Tauranga wants to be considered for Motorhome Friendly Town status, then it needs to have a look at, in particular, the two provisions around designated parking and the ability for standard sized motorhomes to fit in those parking sites. And secondly, the broad brush policy that prohibits anyone from freedom camping outside a private residence.
Yeah, just James, with the people staying outside, I love motorhoming myself, and for some reason we also have lots of young people that come stay with us. I don't know why, but they've often got the other type of, the smaller motorhomes, and they do park outside on the berm. But what is the, in your experience, what is a reasonable amount of time? Is it 2 or 3 days, something along those lines, or 4 days? What's reasonable if you're going to visit friends in a new?
Yep. Well, given the fact that your bylaw explicitly encourages certified self-contained vehicles, the council just needs to appreciate that every certified vehicle has the ability for the occupants to freedom camp for a minimum of 3 days. And so, as a rule of thumb, we generally encourage councils to look at 2 to 3 days as a minimum, understanding that there are other issues they've got to take into consideration. But you know that a vehicle that has a certified self-containment warrant and certificate can at least accommodate the occupants for a minimum of 3 days.
Thank you, Mr. Imlek, for... Oh, we've got one further question from Councillor Malloy.
If I may, further to what I was saying before, tell me, does the Motorhome Association have a set of protocols or conditions that they recommend to cities around or towns around New Zealand that they use when we're drafting our bylaws? Do you have a set that you have worked through all the issues with, like the conflict sometimes with park users, a conflict with residents in a city, all of those issues that you've worked through and said this is what we think will work for everybody?
Sure. Look, there's no one-size-fits-all approach to this, but as I mentioned earlier, we've worked with Local Government New Zealand. We've put together a freedom camping bylaw template, which is the first starting point. Local Government New Zealand has also put together some very useful guidance, and we've essentially collated all the best practice examples throughout the country, put it all together into one document to help councils navigate their way through the issues that you've just mentioned. It's important to note that this is an evolving issue, and that we're constantly reviewing these guides, but as a starting point, there's no reason why you shouldn't refer to those documents to begin with.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the submission. On behalf of the association, I want to acknowledge the some very well dressed members of the Motor Caravan Association who are here in support of the submission as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker, colleagues, is Jane Linden, and her submission is on page 43 of our agenda. Ms. Linden, you've got, there's been 5 minutes, 10 minutes set aside for your submission, which you are free to use as you wish. And if you do finish earlier, my colleagues may have some questions for you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good afternoon, councillors. For those of you who don't know me, my name's Jane Linden. I've been a resident of this city and a former councillor, well, a resident for 35 years and a former city councillor. I wrote my original submission on opening day as I was going away, but asked to speak, so now I'm elaborating further on my submission. And I have 20 copies for you to have a look at after. Firstly, you say that health and safety and environment are most important. Well, freedom camping spaces, as they are at the moment, are just downright dangerous. They are just ordinary car parks with a bit of extra paintwork. Motorhomes and caravans parked side by side should be at least 3 metres apart. Everyone has gas on board, and should one have a fire or mishap, it could turn into a major fireball, endangering not only campers but all in the vicinity. This is the #1 rule of the Motorhome Caravan Association. The areas are too small when one considers average length of vans is about 7 metres. They don't fit in a normal car park. Surely you and staff should be able to understand this fact. There are more than enough of these vehicles driving around the city and environs. There should be parking for at least 2 to 3 vans side by side at any of the allowable parks. There are now a large number of women travelling on their own in motorhomes, and therefore single spaces like the one down at Graham Park Archery on the town side are unsafe, as the bush houses vagrants and druggies. In fact, in reality, for safety's sake, there shouldn't be a Freedom parking spot there at all, just some parks on the Waikato foreshore side. Part of Sulphur Point is a recreation and marine reserve. I fought hard some years ago to prevent the Regional Council from building an office block on Sulphur Point. This area is for recreation, and motorhomes and caravanners with fully self-contained vehicles should also be able to enjoy the area with the wonderful water views. I advocate that you increase the parking at the boat launching area to 10 parks, and strictly no longer than 2 consecutive nights. I do not agree with prohibiting freedom camping here. You say you need more space for the public. Well, motorhomes are also public. They're part of it. It is also more pleasing to the eye when campers are spaced out a bit and not jammed in like sardines in a tin. Parking at Ferguson Park should be increased from 2 to 5. Same rules apply as my second point. Coolum Park should remain as it is. What is wrong with putting down Kobe blocks in the grass? Again, it is a popular spot, and I know of Tauranga residents who own motorhomes who park in these shoreside parks in winter to get their motorhome fix. They are also ratepayers. Matua Saltmarsh increased to 2 parks from, say, 5 or 6 p.m. at night to the following morning at 9 a.m. This is a small area, so just an overnight park would be good. I agree with increasing parks at the other areas you mention in your draft summary. I also agree for the CEO to allow temporary freedom camping in a controlled area for an event or other activity. NZMCA Napier branch organised an area on Marine Parade for the Art Deco Festival. It's brilliant and well organised, and of course pack in, pack out, meaning what one brings to the area they take away with them. 3, people who purchase motorhomes and caravans spend a lot of money on their vehicles and are properly certified with freshwater, grey water and black water tanks. Not only do they have the blue sticker on the back, but also a card in the pocket on the windscreen or side windows of vehicles, and will usually have a written self-containment certificate in their vans. Furthermore, they spend money in the towns and villages they stay in or pass through, and really appreciate the scenery and the area they park in. Most abide by the rules. If they don't, they have association wings and a number on them. Fine them and lay a complaint with the NZMCA. We now have a complaints officer to deal with errant members who spoil the privileges of the law-abiding majority. Those so-called little vans, known as sliders, station wagons, people movers, whatever, displaying blue self-contained stickers on the back are no more self-contained than my or your cars. They obtain these stickers on the internet or through backpackers, and they don't spend money. You see them in grocery shops with a handful of packet noodles and not much else. They throw their rubbish on the side of parks, crap all over the place, and you see them going into lakes and rivers with a cake of soap to wash themselves. They don't care for the environment in other people's countries. I have seen and heard it all. Not only this, but they park or slide so close to other motorhomes and caravans that often one can't even open or shut their door. Rental companies are also at fault for hiring these vehicles and telling the hirers that if they bring back the portable potty with the seal still intact, then they get a refund. These are the sort of vehicles that need to be banned and heavily fined, and you need to police more stringently. If Whakatane District Council can do it, so can Tauranga. If you want to cater for these young and not so young people in sliders, provide a park on the outskirts of town, on an old metal dump, or a hard area with a superloo or portable toilets, and a rubbish skip. A number of tourist towns in the South Island have done this in the last year to great effect. For example, Wanaka, Lake Pukaki, and Twizel. And now I have an out-of-field suggestion. The Mount Maunganui campground is a council-controlled camp as I understand it. In the off-season, why don't you allow, say, up to 20 motorhome or caravans, NZMCA members in self-contained vehicles to stay for any 4-day period for, say, $10 a night? The ablution and kitchen facilities have combination locks. Members don't need to use these and can dump and get water at a public dump station. The area where they could camp would be behind and next to the hot pools. This area is largely empty during the winter season. A win-win situation. Some money for the camp for maintenance and a place for motorhomers, responsible motorhomers and caravans to stay. In conclusion, I support responsible campers and the ability to freedom camp around our city, and there are a large number of them. There is a huge difference between responsible campers and those freedom campers in sliders, people movers, station wagons and cars with blue stickers on them. Councillors and staff need to understand the difference and allow responsible campers to enjoy this city and spend their money, which they would do. Thank you for listening. Any questions?
Thank you. Any questions, colleagues? No, thank you for your submission, Councillor Linden. I acknowledge your election to this estimable body in 2001. So thank you. We'll be deliberating in May.
I have these copies here for you. Can I give them to...
Absolutely, yep, we can circulate those copies. Colleagues, our next submitter is Janet Chambers, and her submission is on page 40 of our agenda. And the time set aside for this submission is 5 minutes, but it is yours to use as you wish, but we may have some questions after.
Certainly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the Council, members of the public. In my 5 minutes, I'm really going to address 2 areas, but I'd like to state that it's purely self-serving. I don't have a camper van at the moment, but when I have the funds and the time to get away in it, I will certainly be out there enjoying the beauty that New Zealand has to offer us. My 2 items I really want to address are the changes at Coolum Park and parking outside residential and commercial premises. So I feel that Coolum Park is a lovely big park and could certainly sustain the amount of camper vans that is currently being allowed. The submission does say to protect the grassed area, but in the changes that were originally proposed for Coolum Park, there was actually some paved area. Some of the people I've spoken to suggested that the problems they feel with the parking at the moment is the location. If you're on the playground, you're looking directly through the camper vans. Directly on the other side of the roadway, there is a very large space between further down from the toilet block towards the roadway, where there are camper vans would not be impeding any seating areas or any barbecues. It could be that a logical option would be to pave an area there. So again, the sort of paving that lets the grass grow through. If you're going to pave it, you're going to impact the grass anyway. So I think the item about the grassed area, we're through the bylaws, it is talking about having a paved area for camper vans, so that would seem logical. The other thing around camping outside, directly outside residences, I feel that's probably been covered in previous submissions, but from my point of view, if I am a responsible camper in a self-contained camper van, I don't see that there would be a problem coming down to visit outside Aunt Ethel's place and being able to park outside her place for a day or 2 when I'm visiting. I do understand that there are a lot of unresponsible people doing it, but I think that members of the Camper Van Association and so on who are responsibly using their vehicles are being impacted by everybody's view of the unresponsible, and there should be maybe other laws to cover this. That's all from me.
Thank you for that submission, Ms. Chambers. That was precise and concise. It was fantastic. Any questions, colleagues? No, there'd be... Oh, yes, Councillor Catherine Stewart.
Thank you. What do you think would be the easiest system? So if someone gives permission to park outside their house, what's the easiest way of, I suppose, if someone wanted to monitor that the permission's been given, what do you think would be the easiest way to do that?
Maybe an official slip that the camper van owner can keep. That's a very hard one, because you could have permission slips that all the residences have, but that's not going to work. You could have slips that the owner of the camper van gets and gets signed by the owner of the house. But again, you could forge that. So I think that's a very hard one to address.
Thank you for your submission. We'll be considering it in May. Thank you very much. Our next submitters are John and Laurel Colley, and I believe we have a tabled item from them. Their submission is on page 36 of our agenda, and they have requested 5 minutes. Thank you. Just John today?
Yeah, my wife's here, but I'm speaking on it.
No worries.
Both of us.
So yes, you've got 5 minutes to speak as you wish to us. We're all ears.
Okay, thank you for the opportunity. My name's John Colley. I'm speaking on behalf of my wife and myself, as I've said. So, can you hear?
Sorry. Just to, yeah, if you just bring it forward, the sound will carry. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. My name's John Colley. I'm speaking on behalf of my wife and myself. We are residents of Forrester Drive and owners of a self-contained motorhome. We've reviewed the proposed changes to the Freedom Camping Bylaw, and we really have insufficient knowledge about various city locations to comment on the merits of adding or deleting sites, apart from Ty Park, which we know well. In regard to Ty Park, it's been long identified as a place to accommodate up to 2 self-contained vehicles for up to 2 nights in any calendar month. We support this provision of an area for overnight parking for self-contained vehicles. When the Freedom Camping places were first marked out at Ty Park, locals were surprised that the parks were in the location that was marked out, and initially there was confusing signage relative to those. It looked like the parks had been identified by people with little idea or experience of freedom camping. And if the handout has been distributed, you'll see the photo at the bottom of that front page there, which shows the area that's been identified for camping. It is on what you might call the good side of the park, close to where people carry out their recreation. It's relatively close to the playground area as well, which you get a lot of people down the park there with their kiddies. Now, the total area that's marked out for the 2 existing parks is only 5.6 metres deep and 5.5 wide. It's effectively 2 standard car parks. These may be suitable for the high ace type vans or other things that we've heard about recently from other speakers that could squeeze into these standard parking spaces. However, for many vehicles specifically built and certified as self-contained motorhomes, they're inappropriate. They are too short. Any camper van over 5.6 metres will intrude into the traffic flow. They're really too close together. As we've heard other speakers say, the Caravan Association recommends a 3 metre separation, and that's for safety reasons. And finally, for casual park users, that's the majority of the people in the Welcome Bay, Ohauidi area, these may be considered prime spaces for people that are coming there for their daily recreation with their family, for picnicking and outdoor activities, etc. There's a couple of photos there. The first one shows how the overhang of a vehicle intrudes into the parking area. That's intruding by about 1 metre into the traffic flow area. And the next photo shows how much space is left, relatively short, narrow area of space for a second vehicle. That's on a standard car parking arrangement. In respect to Ty Park, we believe there's appropriate alternative parking. It's offset and on the other side of the access road, It's a parking area without bollards, which hinder the how you can park in the existing area. This is an area that's 7.6 metres wide and 5.5 deep. And with no bollards around it, a vehicle that's greater than 5.6 metres in length can park in there safely with the overhang out over the grass areas. You've then got a couple of photos showing a motorhome parked in that area. This is a 7.5 metre motorhome, which is, I would say, is fairly common. We've heard talk of vehicles of more than 6 or 7 or whatever. This is a fairly standard sort of motorhome, and those photos show how it can park quite safely in that parking area with the overhang at the rear going over the grassed area. It's not intruding the traffic flow, and there's sufficient space in there for a second motorhome to be parked there as well. I just reiterate that for that is a proposed location, and to be successful, there mustn't be any bollards placed around it. There's been bollards placed around all the other parking areas at Thai Park. We guess that's to stop people driving out onto the main entertainment areas or activity areas, but round a self-contained vehicle park, we should do away with the bollards so that you've got provision for vehicle overhangs. We do not propose to increase the number of vehicles that can overnight. If there are more than 2 vehicles, then one is parking illegally, which is the same as at present, and this would just be an enforcement issue. Of some concern may be whether vehicles are actually compliant, and this has been hinted at by previous speakers. And what we've seen in other locations is enforcement officers relying on the blue sticker, which is a picture of down there, on a vehicle as being fully self-contained. And as other speakers have said, those stickers are readily available if you want them. Cost nothing. There's no actual compliance whatsoever. And yeah, it's disappointing to see in other localities where the rangers, enforcement officers are just relying on those. All self-contained vehicles do have a registration card in the front of them which confirms that they are fully self-contained, as well as they should be carrying specific documentation within the vehicle. Hopefully our city's enforcement officers are aware of this and do not rely on that blue sticker, which is basically a waste of space. We therefore recommend, or the thrust of our submission is that we recommend that the Freedom Camping area at Thai Park be relocated to opposite the current parking spaces as we've identified below, and there's a picture there which I've very crudely marked where the existing area is in black and the proposed area is in red. Thank you for this opportunity, and if you have any questions, we'll endeavour to answer them.
Thank you for the very clear submission and also pointing out the obstruction. I'm sorry, yeah, we don't have any time for questions at this stage, but that was very clear. That was fantastic. Thank you. Our next submission, ladies and gentlemen, is from Kate Barry-Pacino, and her submission, or the person speaking to it, is on page 40 of our agenda. Is Kate here? No? Well, in that case, were there any questions of the previous speaker? No? Okay, then we should... this is a question, Councillor Molloy?
A suggestion.
Yes, you may ask us.
A suggestion. I believe it's confusing that we lump everything into the Freedom Camping Bylaw, because in my mind, there's at least 2 distinct groups. I think there should be a Freedom Camping Bylaw, but there also should be a self-contained camping bylaw. But quite different, and it actually is confusing, and we mix, it's problematic.
Thank you for that observation. The next speaker is and forgive me for I cannot pronounce your last name, sir, so I'll ask you for your assistance. Rod. Me, Harry. I didn't want to get that wrong. Thank you. Thank you for that, Mr. Meharry. His submission is on page 41 of our agendas, colleagues. Mr. Meharry has 10 minutes set down, which you can use as you wish, but if you finish earlier, then my colleagues may wish to ask you some questions. Over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I wanted to do today was come along and give you some inspiration. I read in the paper, that you were doing a change to your bylaws, and I thought, this is desperation. There's two things in life. We change for either desperation or inspiration, and what I want to do is give you some inspiration. I've owned a caravan a number of years, and I say caravan. Today I've all heard about motorhomes, and the trouble with a caravan is you have a tow vehicle and it becomes extremely long and extremely hard to park. And I've got to tell you a little secret. You cannot shop in Tauranga with a caravan. There's just nowhere to park. You just drive straight through the place. I live at Matatā, I go straight through to Katikati, get my coffee. I can't stop here. And so I thought, I don't know if you realise the potential of the market out there. I looked online and I saw that 45,000 members have joined the Motorhome Association in less than 5 years, and it's growing at an extraordinary rate. And those people are all grey nomads. So there's three types of freedom camper, right? There's the what we call the whiz bangers, and the door goes whiz bang every night, all night. And then there's the tourist who comes in and picks up the motorhome, and it's a 6-berth, 4-berth, and they're usually from Germany, sometimes Australia, and quite often they have children. And then there's the grey nomad. So there's three types of people on the road, and you've got to cater differently to the three types. Now the whiz bangers, all they want to do is come to town and do activities. If you don't have activities in Tauranga that excites them, they won't even come here. They may come here for a look, but they're not coming for serious. Rotorua they go to because they want to do whitewater rafting, bungee jumping, all those sorts of things. So there's a huge opportunity to attract them to Rotorua. Some of them will stay here and travel. They're usually one night. They're low spenders. I've heard people say they only spend their money on noodles. It's not true. Some of them are quite creative. But what they do need is they need cover. They need cover because they can't stand outside their vans in adverse weather. They need cover, they need barbecues, and they need toilets. Don't surmise that they've got toilets in their vans, because they don't. So the reality is they need those three things. So if you're going to cater for those whiz-bangers in this area, you have to provide the infrastructure, and you have to exploit what they're here for. They're here for activities. If they're here to go skydiving, let them stay at the airport. Simple. It's easy. The next type, the tourist, they want to stay predominantly at the camping grounds because they have money. They usually travel well-heeled. They will stay in those camping grounds, and occasionally they will find some freedom spots if they want to experience some other part of the country other than a camping ground, right? And they do that. They get sick of staying in camping grounds. They're all the same. And so they want to experience some of the outback. They might go to dock camp, something like that. But the grey nomads, which is the growing business in Rotorua, and Tauranga here has a lot of industry based around the grey nomads. You only have to drive down the road here and see how many of them are for sale and serviced. So if you want your van serviced in Tauranga, you may have to stay over somewhere. Where are you going to stay? And I tell you, we don't want to stay in a car park. We just don't want to stay in a car park. We want to stay on grass. Now, like I said, there's 44,000 joined in the last 5 years. I think there's 77,000 active members. Each one of those 77,000 members will have Tauranga on their bucket list, just as we have Nelson, just as we have Wanaka. They're all on the bucket list. We're going to travel here sometime in the next 2 years. And whether we stay or whether we drive through depends on the council. Right? Now, it's not hard. You just got to find an open space, provide some toilets, some water, a dump station, and have very little rules. We don't want the rules. We just want the space, right? And we will come and stay and we'll interact with your city. Now, you have a jazz festival here every Easter. Golden opportunity. Golden opportunity. You just about have every grey nomad in New Zealand here if you opened up the racecourse and said, hey, come and stay. You only have to look at Art Deco weekend down in Napier and they put them along the waterfront there. Hundreds of them. Hundreds of them. And I've travelled in Australia where they have opened up the race course, and I've been in Port Hedland where there was over 1,000 caravans in the race course. And they had a box at the gate, and it said, if you buy anything in Port Hedland, could you put the receipt in the box? The box was overflowing. You know, everybody buys fuel, everybody buys grog, everybody buys food, everybody goes and does the touristy thing. We jumped on the boat that went around the tankers. So it's a matter of seeing it as an opportunity, not as a problem. If you see it as a problem, you end up with what you got. Nobody's going to go to a place that has 2 spots, 5 o'clock in the afternoon. They go, oh, I drive all the way up there, they're full. Then where do I go? They start to panic. And the whiz-bangers are exactly the same. They want to know the destination is there and it's available. They don't want to be driving around from spot to spot. What do they do in the end? Park illegally and cause you untold problems. And you've got to police it. Get the space, get the right facilities. You don't have to police it. Honestly, you don't have to police it. It will self-police. I've been in Australia, been to places where they've got signs up on the toilet. It says, to help us out, can you clean the toilet as you go? And could you put a gold coin donation in the box because it helps the cleaner? Everybody puts a gold coin donation in. You know, you talk about freedom camping. It doesn't have to be free. We don't want it free. We just want it cheap. You know, we can all afford to go to the camping ground, but we choose not to. The camping ground is like, no, it's a sterile place. You know, you park right next to somebody else who's the same as the person beside you, and we're all fighting to go and use the shower. We want the space. We're a very social group. We want to light a fire, we want to sit around it, we want to tell stories, and we want to have good memories. Now, the next problem you've got to deal with is that this whole industry is driven by the app. The Wiki Camps app, the Motorhome Association app, the Campmate app. Those apps are the Bible for anybody who's got a camper or caravan. All the tourists use them. And they're driven by comment. And if your staff should be monitoring those sites all the time, looking at the comments. That's where you'll get the feedback. That's where you'll get the problems brought up. And that's where you'll get the opportunities to make some money. Right? Because what people put on those apps just goes through the industry like Wi-Fi. We all follow the groups on Facebook. I think there's 4 or 5 Motorhome Association type groups on Facebook. Every day, people are giving good comments or bad comments. I don't see many good comments about Tauranga. I see heaps about Kaurau. Kaurau is the best place in the world. Free power, free swims. Council are keen to get them. And you know the end result of people going to Kaurau and staying is they bought a house there. You can't buy a house in Kaurau anymore. Once upon a time, they couldn't give them away. Now all the motorhome associations are buying them as a place to have as a base. They've got to have somewhere when they're in the middle of winter when they're sick of travelling and they want to go somewhere. Kaurau has become that spot. The council in Kaurau is very keen to have them come because they know the flow-on effect into the property market and the other opportunities. So you've got 3 groups and you've got to cater for those 3 groups. You've got to find some big open space. The race course is a classic, right? We don't mind paying. I don't mind coming to the council building and buying my swipe card for $5 so I can swipe to get into an area. The barrier arm goes up, bang, I'm in, right? That's not a problem. I'll pay $10. But I don't want to park between 2 lines because my rig is longer than the length of this room. By the time I put my Ranger and my big caravan on, I can't park in a diagonal car park. Oh, 15 metres. It is 15 metres. I had to measure it to get onto the ferry. Yeah, $15, yeah. So I went to the, one night we had a function at the club in the Mount. So I thought, okay, I'll take my caravan. And I read on the sign, yep, freedom camping, stick between the lines. I thought, well, that's not going to happen. So I parallel parked. So did the guy in front of me. The guy in front of me got a $200 fine. Right? He was ropeable. Luckily, I escaped, and I don't know how. But you know, what does he do? He jumps on Facebook, he jumps on the app sites, and he says Tauranga is the biggest dickhead place you ever come across, doesn't he? Right? That's the sort of press you get. And why? Because anybody with common sense would know you cannot parallel park with a big bus or a caravan. It's impossible. You go right across the road, you block the road. So, you know, it's not rocket science. It's just a matter of saying, okay, how can we encourage these people? Don't put them in car parks. Get some wide open space. We don't care where the space is. We do like it close to some amenities, but I think that can be got around by having some good transport. Now, the other thing before I finish is there are companies starting to spring up that will provide the facilities. There's companies that are building toilets and shower blocks that are portable. They're like containers. They drop them off. They charge. People don't mind paying $2 for a shower. Whiz-bangers don't mind paying $2 for a shower. So use those private enterprise companies and do the right thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mihara. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Councillor Brown.
Thank you. I've done some freedom camping in Europe and got caravans, etc. So you talked about you don't mind paying, you want cheap. But from my view, one of the things that sits in parallel is you want that security so that you're not freedom camping on your own, because we got ambushed by a whole lot of people freedom camping in the middle on the side of the road, and it's not a pleasant experience. So I think security, would that be fair? It says comes alongside cheap?
Yeah, sure. You know, one of the big problems is that people in whiz-bangers want security. And that's why they come park right beside your caravan. You wake up in the morning, open the door, and bang, there they are. Right? Think, wow, there's a whole lot of open space. Why'd you park here? And it's two young girls, and they said, oh, we feel safer. So you've got to understand, they want security. So to lift an arm and let them into an area, they'll pay. No problem at all.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mihari, for that submission. We'll be deliberating in May. And that was actually a brilliantly delivered submission as well. I appreciate that. Thank you.
You're lucky I haven't got half an hour.
Sorry, we have to move on to our next speaker.
Just very quick.
Yes.
Yes, no answer.
You can ask me a question. Our submitter has left.
Oh, well, has he gone? No, he hasn't. But was he available for consultancy?
And that's from one of our grey nomads. Can I please have call up to the table Grant Simpson, who is our next submitter. Grant Simpson. Is Grant in the room? I'll take that as a no. Is Bruce Crosby? Bruce Crosby's in the room. Mr. Crosby's submission on behalf of the Papamoa Holiday Park is on page 11 of your agenda, colleagues. Bruce, you've got 5 minutes to use as you wish, but if you finish a little bit earlier, then my colleagues may have some questions.
Thank you, Chairman. Chairman Steve, councillors. A little bit of background about myself. I've been Papamoa Beach Holiday Resort for 35 years. I've represented our industry at the highest level as the President for the Holiday Park Association of New Zealand, and I actively follow what's going on in the Freedom Camping saga all around New Zealand since our lovely government made the Freedom Camping Act 2011. But I have a solution to everybody's problems here. If you've got an overweight van or an overlength van, the answer is a holiday park. You actually have to pay a little bit of money though. That solves the solution. The current, it seems only 3 years ago we were here doing the last review, and in general, as somebody who observes it on a daily basis, it's working pretty good. The word holiday park's only been mentioned twice by all our submitters, so I take it they want something for free. Now, in my opinion, there's only a few tweaks needed of the current bylaw until the Responsible Camping Working Group report can be fully considered, and hopefully government enacts it within 3 years when we review this again. Because there's some very valid points in there. Everybody's been consulted, from NZMCA members, council, or local government, etc. And if you read it, it's got 4 outcomes, and it talks about 4 camping zones. Tauranga has escaped the bad press of freedom camping relatively good. I follow what happens in the South Island, and it's disastrous. When you open up a paddock for these people, it is a slum. And as the last man called them, slider whatevers, those people there do not want to pay anything, and they mess up our country. However, for the people that say they shouldn't be here, If those people weren't in this country, there's going to be no one to pick the kiwi fruit, no one to prune the kiwi fruit. So we need those people in this country. However, who causes the problem? The kiwi fruit industry, etc., should deal with it. They should allow people to stay on the orchards, farms, whatever, and that will cater for that. Currently, they just go anywhere. They don't want to pay any money. And so when reviewing a bylaw for the city, to me the first responsibility should be to the residents and ratepayers. We like to have control of what happens in our city. We don't like to be told by somebody else what we should and shouldn't do. Freedom camping in the city, really? I have no problem with freedom camping in the right positions, but not through the Mount, Tauranga, whatever. However, it's now part of the city fabric, so we have to work with it. But we must ensure that this activity doesn't impinge on the rights of our residents and ratepayers. As far as the reserves go, generally working pretty good. Since the council has sealed, for instance, Stella Place and some of the other reserves, car parking areas and through Papamoa, and marked out the sites, it's really fixed the problem. For instance, Stella Place, I could go up there in the morning, 9, 10 camper vans all along the front. Nowhere for the residents to park, watch the surf, go surfing. Pretty simple. We said, why don't you mark out an area, which they did do. So if it's not in that spot, get a ticket. I agree with the submitters. The site should be longer and wider because it's crazy. It's the width of a car. However, so that's working pretty good. As far as the roads under where there's a 50-kilometre area, take Blake Park. Is this new review suggesting you can park all along Blake Park side? Really? That's what it says to me. There's a lot of confusion about that, and I think the staff should look at it. Or is that what they intended, or is it an error? Otherwise, you'd have hundreds more freedom camping sites in the city. Council car parks, there's no number on them. They can fill up with camper vans. I think that needs looking at. I've mentioned the 3.5 tonne rule, the length of vehicles. I agree they should be made longer to cater for the legal camping. This morning, for example, my holiday resort, 3 spots each side of me, which I'll address later. I think it's criminal. 6 sites. Guess what? 5 of them are occupied by slider vans, illegal motorhomes, which prohibits the nice people staying there. So if we got rid of those illegal slider vans with the homemade stickers on the back, our good folk here will have more spots. We don't need more spots, we just need to police what we've got. Campground regulations are outdated. No one takes any notice. If a school hosts more than 2 motorhomes and takes money, it should be a registered campground. It's not. So the camping ground regulations will be reviewed in the responsible camping submissions. So I suggest everybody in this room is a responsible camper. There's no slider van people here, are there? No? We're all on the same side, trust me. I support the New Zealand Motor Caravan Association to the tune of $3,000 a year by placing ads in their magazine. We do a deal for them in the off-peak season. Works out they pay $15.60 a night. Is that too much? I have to take the GST out, don't forget. If you stay more than a week, it goes down. $15.60. You've got 5-star facilities. We've got one of the best holiday parks in New Zealand. So don't let the money thing confuse you. Seasonality, sure, when it's peak season, we pay. You get on an aeroplane, it's full, you pay. That's called life. I'd just like to take a couple of points on the official NZMCA submission, where he talks about virtual prohibition. Please don't be sucked in by that. He states, will virtually prohibit freedom camping throughout the Tauranga area. Really? I don't think so. That's a bit of motive. And he also mentions it on his point 38, where he talks about it again. He also says on page 56, where you're parking directly outside a residence, etc., the rule is uncertain as it requires freedom campers to determine at a glance whether they are parking on the same side of the road as a private residence or commercial industrial premises. Really? I think you guys know when you're parking outside a house. And he goes on to say, it creates too much confusion if there's a need to determine whether a freedom camper is parked directly outside a premises. Really? Pretty obvious, I would have thought.
Sorry, Mr. Crosby, I'll just check to see if Grant Simpson is here. Is Grant Simpson here? No, you can continue, yeah.
Thanks, Chairman Steve. No. He also mentions a little bit about protecting residential views and privacies of residents. They kind of apply scant regard to that, and I don't think that's right. Let's look after our residents and ratepayers first. Reprice, I've covered that for $15.60. You can stay in our 5-star holiday park in the off-season. That's not too dear. Read the gas bottle issue, which seems to be quite a big deal. I agree the site should be wider. The figure of 3 metres is bandied about. I just hope that when they park their camper van next to their house, which you see them right up beside their house at home, that they observe the same rule if they've got people staying in their motorhome. Redemand. Our holiday park is full from 28 December to about 16 January. The rest of the time we have sites available, so that's not an issue. Well, thank you very much, madam, but most people, obviously, you could take 7 or 8 motorhomes out up to $1 million. True. So they've got plenty of money. So once again, I will object formally about the Stella Place and the Papamoa Domain car parks, which are right at each end of my boundary. It causes us grief. People free camp there, snipping, steal showers we call it, and when we catch them, they're abusive and to my staff and myself, and I don't think it's fair what our business contributes to the city. We do 77,000 people nights a year, so it's no small thing, and our business is quite an asset to the city. So on that note, I thank you for listening to me, and I wish you well. I always used to start by saying I feel sorry for council having to deal with this issue that was forced on them 2011, but hopefully with the Responsible Camping Forum report, when we do it again, things throughout New Zealand, we need more of a universal policy. So people, when they go currently to different areas, it's all over the place. They've no idea. But the app is the big thing, I agree. And if you read it, there's some nice comments about our resort. Thank you.
We've got time for a question. Councillor Currick, you have a question?
Your closing comment was your camping ground is an asset to the city.
Correct.
And you've quantified it in your report saying it provides $7 million worth of benefit to this community. Has that actually been quantified properly?
That's been quantified by Tourism Bay of Plenty. They have domestic and overseas spend figures in Tauranga City.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Crosby, for your submission. We'll be deliberating on the points you raise in May. I have a question of staff just in relation to a point a previous submitter made. In terms of the freedom camping legislation, is council able to charge for use of some sites within public car parks and in reserves?
It's difficult as the Freedom Camping Bylaw refers to camping, which is something that you do not pay for. So we would need to look into whether or not we are, if we were to charge for services as opposed to the camping, but by a very sort of plain reading of the Act, freedom camping is something you do not pay for.
Thank you for that clarification. Last call for Grant Simpson. Okay, is Jason Smith present with us this afternoon, or his representative? Jason Smith. No. Is Nairi Pennell in the chamber? No, would you mind bringing your submission forward at this time? Fantastic. So Nairi, we've allocated you 5 minutes, but if you wish to speak a little longer, we are not time poor at this time, so you may speak a little longer if you wish. Over to you.
First, let me say that my family are freedom campers. We have a bus that's fully self-contained, and when we go camping, we do not leave our footprint behind us. I also want to say that all freedom campers are not scumbags living off the livelihood of others and scattering their litter everywhere, stealing folks' laundry off their line for clean clothes to wear, or leaving a disgusting mess in their wake. What I would like you to know, though, is that neither are all freedom campers squeaky clean, law-abiding citizens just wanting a place to stay for the night. Freedom campers come, they go. They don't pay rates in our city. Well, some of them do, because they just hop across the way and stay for a night. But do they care the same as the residents in the suburbs? Do they? I asked myself how many of you in this room...
Sorry if I can just, interrupt.
Sure.
Folks, I appreciate the passion that's brought to the discussion, but if we could please allow the speaker who's giving the submission to speak. Others are able to speak to their submissions or indeed contact councillors at another time. But if we could just respect the speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. I ask myself how many of you in this room would be happy to lay in your bed at night at 10:30 or later, listening to people arguing, fornicating and using gutter language right under your bedroom window, not 5 feet away. If you're uncomfortable hearing me talk about it, then try living with it. Would you be happy to take a plastic bag each time you leave your home for your doggy poo, but you end up collecting condoms, food scraps, disposable nappies and used sanitary towels? I don't think you'd like to be doing that. I don't like doing it, but I do because I don't like our children and our old people having to see things that they shouldn't have to see. There's confusion between a freedom camper and a homeless subject, and I totally get that. Both pose a problem. I include both in my concerns for Greaton Car Park, along with a few other concerns that I have. Freedom campers mostly fill the council bills, leaving shoppers nowhere to dispose of their refuse. The others, well, they just leave theirs where they are, parked up and take off. Foreigners dumping their garbage in the hedges or along my fence line abuse me in their language and drive off if I ask them to tidy up after themselves. There are rotten trees in Greaton Car Park that would go up in a puff of smoke with rubbish added to the mix. Other New Zealand councils administer a safety policy where trees are kept away from housing. Tauranga Council, well, no. The rotten fence that council are happy to leave falling into my property would ignite in a flash, and I've known a camper to light his gas fire right in close so that he's out of the wind. The fence is regularly hit by car park users, especially vans and campers who want to squeeze in so they aren't liable to move on. We dread the day where a vehicle is going to come right through that fence and hit our house. I called council with regard to the trees in Greaton Car Park and the danger they pose, only for one chap to lie to me and deny they were dying. Another chap from council who visited me 2 years ago told me if it worried me, I could get an arborist and have the trees trimmed. They hang over my roof. So forgive me, I don't direct my comments to you people in particular, but I do speak my personal experience of council and its representatives. I don't believe our council staff give a monkey's toss about safety, anyone's. I'm not convinced council are even aware of their duty of diligence to safety of Tauranga's people. I want to be safe. I want the public to be safe. I'm not the Bank of New Zealand and I do not have the means to take care of what is the council's responsibility by hiring an arborist. It should not fall to me to clear away broken branches off those trees, something that I have to do regularly. Said trees have cost me $2,800 in roof repairs for the damage they've done. That's nothing to the human damage they could do. There could be campers, squatters, old people, children, anybody, animals. It's dangerous when branches break away. Other councils would be ashamed to reveal, as our council do, that they only plant trees, they don't care for them. They don't care for them. Freedom campers do not belong in the CBD at the back door of retailers, a place where if you want firewood you need only scale a tree to gather the dead stuff. A freedom camper cannot park on the road outside a property, as I understand. Why can they park up on the doorstep of businesses and 5 feet from the bedrooms of private dwellings. Greeting Car Park is a prized spot for thieves and freedom campers to perpetrate their dishonest ways. Absolutely perfect. Residents deserve to sleep in their beds at night without having to get up, call the police and complain about frightening issues going on under their bedroom windows. Visitors to the library deserve a safe place to park. The parking on Greerton Road has been removed that used to allow people to park up for the library, but it's been taken away because, oh well, a gentleman moved in there and he had a boat and he wanted to be able to back it out without it being dangerous. I'm telling you, mums with kiddies need to have a safe place to access Plunket. Businesses deserve help to protect their premises from opportunists and theft. It's high time Tauranga Council measured their decisions intelligently. The safety and welfare of Greerton's people should prevail. Greerton Park is not the place for freedom campers, and it never was. Thank you.
Thank you for your... Do you mind taking a few questions,
No.
Ms Pennell? Is that all right? I just see a question from my colleague, Councillor Bill Granger. No? You're just waving at me, rather. It's all right. Hey, Ms Pennell, just in regard to the fence issue, you talked about there being an issue adjoining your property. The fence is rotting, is that correct?
That's right, yes.
Okay. That's something that we can look into. I know my colleagues, Councillor Terry Malloy and Councillor Bill Granger, represent Greerton and on Tauranga City Council, and I'm sure that one of them would be able to follow that up with you.
Thank you.
To see if
I'd
we can come to
appreciate
some
that.
resolution on that.
Thank you.
'Cause that's an issue.
I'm more concerned about the safety of the trees. I have to say that. The fence could probably fall over and ding a few people's cars, and your friends, when they come along to have a look, will see that there are palings that are broken where they've climbed the fence to get themselves clean clothes. Then they climb out of their others and they put them down in the little buxus hedges for me to go and collect and put in rubbish. I don't think the fence would harm anyone as much as those trees. Other councils won't plant that particular species of tree because it's known to fall over at the drop of a hat. It's invasive, and those ones are dying. Tell me all the lies in the world, but you know, you people take yourselves down there, have a look at Greerton Car Park, see how much more parking you could have for shoppers and people visiting the library, and families that want to use the facilities like the lovely things that they have going on in the school grounds. Get rid of what's dangerous.
Thank you for your submission, Ms Pennell. We'll be deliberating in May, and we'll come to a decision after that. Now, is Jason Smith present? Jason Smith? No. Colleagues, we will adjourn until 3:15 when our next submitter is due to speak. We'll adjourn until 3:15. 40 of our agenda, but he has also tabled his submission here as well in front of us. So Mr. Patterson, if you'd be so kind as to come up to the desk. We have you're allocated 10 minutes to use as you wish, but if you do finish before that, my colleagues may wish to ask some questions. Over to you.
How's that? Okay? Yep. Right. My name is Rob Patterson, and it's a submission on the draft Freedom of Camping Bylaw. Mr. Chairman and Councillors, thank you for the opportunity to address the Policy Committee and to make a submission on the draft Freedom of Camping Bylaw 2019. I see there were 266 submissions in total. Some of those are pro forma. I reiterate what I set out in my original submission dated the 22nd of February. That's number 254 on pages 45, 46 and 47 of the agenda booklet. I also refer to Brian Rogers' Weekend Sun editorial because it's a Rogers Rabbit thing attached there too, which provides, in my view, a good analysis of the issues that face you here. I'm not going to go through the submission I've got in the booklet. It's there. You'll understand what I'm saying there. I support also what has been submitted, or what I see, by Kate Barry-Pacino, submission 64 on page 40, Colin Bertelson, submission 87, page 133, and Hank Ruthiers, submission 56 on page 144 and 145. Among others I see there, but I've just selected those ones there. Particularly on Hank Ruthiers' one, suggestions on using Bay Park. Those that are in opposition to the generous proposals forward here are generally reasonably balanced in my view, while those in support of them generally appear to want everything or something for nothing. There probably are three tiers of travellers and campers. The high-end motorhomes are expensive, up to $200,000 plus, and these people can well afford camping grounds and the likes. There's the middle-of-the-road campers who are perhaps a little under pressure financially, and then we have the low-cost users which operate out of small vans who don't want to pay and don't comply generally with what this is all about. Very few permanent Tauranga residents would use Freedom camping spaces in Tauranga, although no doubt they do elsewhere. Freedom camping is a lifestyle choice, providing cheap living at someone else's expense. Size of vehicle is an issue. There is a cost to ratepayers, and that's TCC staff times, compliance issues, signage, water, waste, rubbish, damage and repairs and maintenance to sites. Plus, some campers can be a nuisance to residents and the general public with rubbish and bad behaviour. I'm not saying the bulk of them are, but they are a percentage of what appear there. In short, a burden on residents and ratepayers. In 2018, it seems from one of the figures I've seen, I think it was Bruce Crosby or something said that, it seems 971 infringement notices were issued for 310 complaints. Hours, as I've said in my submission previously there, should be limited to 6 p.m, and I would change what I said there from 9 a.m. to 8 a.m, 2 days a month, and vehicles completely self-contained. Space can be an issue with normal car parks, so ordinary car parks won't work, and there must be no convenience with this parking to workers, businesses, or the public use of reserves restricted by any Freedom camping parking. More use could possibly be made of RSA car parks. I understand the situation is there from the mountain. I think Taurang's the same. It's about $5 a night. They have to go and register with the RSA, but they welcome the people there. Racecourse car parks could be a possibility if that could be arranged. Perhaps also Mount Sports Centre car park. It's the one down at Blake Park. And as Hank Ruthiers said, why not use Bay Park parking facilities? They're used for concerts, speedway and other events, and they camp out on those grounds there, so as long as there's no conflict with the event that's being staged there, there's probably no reason to use that facility. I do not believe myself there is any intrinsic economic benefits to Tauranga City, and if it is claimed there is, how would one quantify those? Would probably be on the basis of creative figures that bear no relation to reality. There seems to be a sense of entitlement by Freedom campers to use TCC ratepayer-funded facilities simply because they grace us with their presence. Each and every right, however, always has a corresponding obligation, duty and responsibility by those using that. If one is paying for accommodation on a camping ground, a motel or similar, you have to register for that. You have to jump through the hoops, literally, to get that. So you're paying for that. Where amenities are provided gratis, often there is no appreciation, no respect that is the case. It is seen and thought to have no value. In summary, I believe the number of Freedom Camper sites needs to be strictly limited and policed. Locations need to be limited. The fewer locations, the better. The easier they are to police, and they should all be out in the open in proper view. We're providing something for nothing, not deluxe views and not seaside luxuries. There needs to be some effort by campers, not just to turn up and go into a parking space, should be made to go, come into TCC, get a serialised, dated sticker that must be prominently displayed on the vehicle, and a small administration fee, say $10 paid to cover administration. Now, that would enable those policing what was going on to look at the number, look at the date, and then can then correlate them to see whether people are frauding them or not playing the game with the stickers they're using. That, sir, is briefly my submission. I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Patterson. A clear submission, as is your custom. Are there any questions from my colleagues? Councillor Malloy.
I might need a little bit of assistance here. Who is the Mr. Patterson? We had a submitter here that gave us a very interesting submission. I think there's a chap that I asked whether he could be lined up as a consultant. Harry, was it? Yeah. And I think he was the one that quoted Kawerau as an example of a town that has welcomed freedom campers. Though I don't like using that term, and the benefits that have since arisen from that. Some of them have decided to make it their home base, and they've brought properties there. Once upon a time, you could practically had to give those properties away. Now they're in demand. There's a whole lot of positive benefits. I can't remember them all, but he was quite positive about the benefits of self-contained camper vans and camping.
Well, I'm not surprised with Kawerau. They've got to attract them in some way. It wouldn't be my holiday destination or most people here, but they encourage that. There are things to do in that area. Yeah. And yes, that's one way they would encourage them. I don't think there's a shortage of people coming here. If anything, we tend to be overcrowded, whereas Kawerau was underutilised, I would imagine. Certainly was in the past. I'm not sure about that.
A fair comment. Thank you.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Rob. In your submission, written submission, you've put some suggestions of sites, and number one, you've got Elite Sports Car Park in the Mount. Do you mean the High Performance Sports Centre just around the corner by Blake Park, the old Cosy Club? Near the old Cosy Club?
They could park there.
Okay, so they could park there, even though there's sports users that use it at 5, 6, 7 o'clock in the morning and there till 8, 9 o'clock at night. Yeah. So,
well, if they're not going to interfere with what's there, and I never see that car park full, and I go past it quite a bit, so if they were using that and they weren't interfering with anything else, I have no problem with that. I think you were also talking about the Mount Club there, further down there's a car park there too, and they may well welcome them. So as long as you're not interfering with the normal use, I don't see an issue, but I think the number should still be limited to a reasonable number.
Well, thank you, Mr. Patterson, for the submission. We'll be considering the points you've raised with the others in May. Thank you. Our next speaker is Sharon Hall. Is Sharon Hall available? No. I've had a request from Mr. John Phillipson to move up a speaking spot as he has a prior commitment. Mr. Phillipson, would you like to speak now? Thank you. You've set down for 10 minutes, and you can use that at that time as you wish. But if you do finish a little bit earlier, there may be some questions from my colleagues. So it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. This is going to be one of the unusual talks because I'm actually not going to say very much, but I've done a bit of an AV, so if you want to just take a look at that and have a bit of a read. you. We've got. I just want to listen to part 2 as well. Part 2 is here, and then we'll. Yes, thank you. No, unfortunately, I ran out of time for music on. That was the intention, but. unfortunately, if I had more time, I finished at about 11 o'clock today, so I put it together quite quickly. But I know I run out my time.
Well, thank you. Appreciate the time you put into that submission. We've got time for one question, if there is one from a colleague. No, thank you for that. We'll be deliberating on the points that you raised there. And I sense there's a couple of submissions we've had already about some common sense things.
Yes.
So,
you can watch those again. You're welcome to have copies of them.
Thank you. Yep. So we'll be deliberating in May, and then we'll make our decision after that. So thank you for your time. Is Sharon Hall present? Sharon Hall? Yes. Oh, there we go. Oh, fantastic. Oh, well, we've got another 5 minutes then, if you'd like to spend some time. Yeah.
No movies this time. Thank you. Thanks for allowing us to make submissions and also to speak to them and show movies. I'm Janice Phillipson. As has already been mentioned, I think we're NZMCA members, but on our own behalf, not for the organisation. We are Tauranga residents and ratepayers, and we're also fairly recent motorhome owners, about 6 months. I have got my written submission that hopefully people will have read, but I just wanted to make a few more comments in relation to that and in relation to some of the things that we've heard already spoken today. The current bylaw appears to discriminate against the medium and larger size motorhomes, as was made really clear in the AV that John showed. That's not only the size of the spaces, excuse me, but also the weight restriction. There's safety concerns due to people having to park quite close to fit into those spaces, which is a fire risk, and we did have an experience at McLaren Falls Park. I think that's probably Western Bay of Plenty, it's not Tauranga City Council, but we were parked with several smaller vehicles, and one of them, there were two young women, I think from Germany, who were using a gas cooker which caught on fire, and if the weather had been bad, they were actually using it outside the back of their vehicle. If the weather had been bad, they could have had that in the vehicle, and there could have been an explosion which could then have spread to surrounding vehicles. So when vehicles are put in very close together, there's that risk, as other people have already mentioned. Yes, we help put it out with our fire extinguisher, yeah. Although numbers of vehicles in the allocated marked areas and the certified self-containment requirement is clearly set out in the bylaws, this doesn't appear to be policed sufficiently. And now driving around looking at the various places in Tauranga where you can freedom camp. Other vehicles, we have often seen freedom camping or appearing to freedom camp outside those marked areas, and because they're a smaller vehicle, they appear to get away with it. They're not so obvious as a motorhome. People have already mentioned fake self-containment stickers, and then the inaccessible or unused toilets, which may be under the bed, or people choose just not to use them for various reasons. We, and a lot of other people have already mentioned this, that we think it would be a great idea for Tauranga to provide more infrastructure and amenities for freedom campers of various kinds. Toilets, showers, rubbish and recycling facilities. Not all freedom campers in small vehicles are responsible, and not all freedom campers in flash motorhomes are responsible either. So it's not right to lump them all into the same and make judgments. We would like Tauranga to welcome and educate travellers, tourists, seasonal workers, because they do benefit the local economy. We would love to see Tauranga attain motorhome friendly status, and I will be interested to read as well what that might involve. Obviously there's a homeless issue in Tauranga that needs to be addressed, and that's part of it as well. Some people living in their cars. And in response to comments about you should just stay in a motor camp, we think people who want to travel and see New Zealand should have a variety of accommodation options and costs to give them choice. For example, you wouldn't say to everybody you have to eat at a high-end restaurant in town. Some people might prefer McDonald's takeaway, and there need to be options to suit different budgets and preferences. And I think John has already mentioned the domain at Te Kōwhata, where there is a toilet block and an area for washing dishes, and people were very welcome for it, and it was recommended they give a $5 donation, and you had some photos of that. And that's an area where I grew up, and I was really impressed to see what they were doing with that area, and a lot of people were enjoying that. So thank you again, and I think I have 20 seconds.
Thank you for taking the time to come and speak to us this afternoon. As I said before, we're going to have another meeting in May in which we'll consider all the submissions we've received. So thank you.
Thank you.
Our next speaker is Malcolm Cantwell. Is Malcolm Cantwell present? Fantastic. So thank you. You've been very patient. I see you've been listening to the other submissions as well. Mr. Cantwell's submission is on page 10 of our agenda.
I'm going to be short and sweet. I've done a lot of travelling throughout New Zealand. I've seen the good and the bad of freedom camping. I don't classify NZMCA type motorhomers as freedom campers. We're certified. We're actually self-contained, completely self-contained. We don't leave our rubbish behind, and I take exception to being classified as a freedom camper as such. The problem that I see is mainly in tourist vans. The people that come into New Zealand and they buy a station wagon or a cheap van, they throw a double bed in the back and they've got a few facilities that they can cook with and travel around New Zealand. That's where your problem actually lies, and I blame a lot of the rubbish and everything else that we see around the country on councils, to be quite frank. If councils took a leading role in actually providing facilities in some of these areas, you wouldn't have defecation in the forests and in the bush around the park sites. If you supplied rubbish bins so people could actually get rid of their rubbish, you wouldn't have the rubbish floating around in the atmosphere and the lakes and everything else. I think it's a responsibility for the country as a whole, and particularly councils, because they look after most of those recreational areas. I've been in the South Island. We just come back from a trip right down to Invercargill. We spent a month down there. We stayed in a little place called Lumsden, just out of Invercargill. They have a station there, which is no longer used. There was something like 40 vans parked in front of that station the night that we stayed there. We didn't stay in the NZMCA camp, which is just a few k's down the road, because we thought, well, we experienced what these sites are like. Well, they actually supply full showers and toilets in Lumsden. They have the old stations been converted so that the camper vans can actually back up to them, and people can use their cooking facilities. They have washing areas where they got sinks for people to wash their dishes and that sort of thing, and you couldn't have found it. And they have rubbish bins so that you can actually get rid of your garbage. Now, we pack in, pack out, but when we dump at a dump station and get fresh water, we need rubbish facilities to get rid of our rubbish if we're touring for months at a time, and that's the same as anybody else. Okay, so those are the sort of facilities that need to be provided by councils. I believe we actually enjoy going down Sulphur Point for a weekend. You know, I can go and throw my surf casting rod out and try and catch a fish or whatever, and spend a weekend down there. According to one of the things that I actually don't like about being down at Sulphur Point is the mere fact that the vans are actually close together. The 3 metre margin is not there. And to be, you know, and that sort of annoys me a bit, because people don't, obviously officers don't realise that, or take into account the safety aspects of vehicles carrying gas cylinders. And a lot of them have actually quite big gas cylinders, 5 kg gas cylinders, which, if they're ignited, they're a bomb. And then you've got the van next door, which has got equivalent on it, and if you've got another van just a little way away, then it becomes a furnace. And you can see what actually happens with gas containers if you look at some of the fire things in Australia, where the houses in the bushfires were ignited one after the other because of the gas cylinders. Explosion, and it went from one property to the other, and it carries on. I lived through that. The other thing is, I'd like to say I am a ratepayer in the city, and I enjoy the facilities we actually have. I would like to see it opened up a little bit more for your tourist people coming through in their little vans, okay? Because they are tourists, and this council has fought for years to get more tourism through Tauranga and Mount Maunganui area. I was on the council for 12 years. I was on the tourism committee. I was a council appointee to the Bay of Plenty Tourism, and I know that we actually fought for years to actually get more people through here, and it's starting to happen with the big tourist boats, but you have a lot of other people coming through here at other times of the year that will spend money here, and you shouldn't actually gloss over the top of that. But the last thing I'd like to say is, don't legislate against us responsible motorhomers. I think that would be really wrong. Just because a few who are outsiders destroy what is a good thing, you shouldn't do it to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cantwell, and I acknowledge your service on Tauranga City Council, I think from the class of 1983, was it?
Go back to about, no, that's about right.
1983.
Yeah,
was your father a councillor before
My dad spent 12 years as city councillor before me, and when he retired, he decided to go to Australia on holiday, and he said, why don't you put your name forward? So I did, and then I got the support from my boss at the time, who was a guy, a consultant engineer, Bruce Henderson, and between him and my wife, we put the nomination in, and the rest is history.
Fantastic. Yeah. If a recent by-election had gone another way, you would have been sitting around the table with Councillor Faulkner again.
Oh, yeah, when Mr. Shipton went. Never mind. We won't talk about him.
Are you happy to receive some questions? Councillor Mason.
Thanks, Malcolm. Good to see you again. I'm
yes.
an employee when you go.
Yep, that's right.
So, as an ex-city councillor, I'm interested to hear your opinion on how we reconcile the difference. As I said, if you look on the list of most friendly towns, and the top 6 cities in terms of population not on that list, and I would put that down because there's a lack of space. The price of land is really high. One of the reasons, and there's more and more people crowding into our parks and reserves and that. So we've got to. I think one of the issues that we've got is less and less space, but more and more people wanting to use that space. And would we? And how do we reconcile whether ratepayers are willing to pay that extra amount to welcome people coming into the city to use their space, their green space? All of those things. I'm just asking how you would do it.
Yeah. No. I think Tauranga's actually got many areas that they could actually use. Okay. Without it costing the ratepayers a lot more. Like at Sulphur Point, you've got 2 public toilets down there. If you allowed camping near those public toilets, for example, and you had rubbish facilities there where people could actually put their stuff in and they were serviced well, then you reduce the risk. 5 days out of 7 days, you've got, the motorboat and fishing club car park there and the lawn in front of it, which you were previously allowed to use, and now it's banned. But for 5 days of the week, it's vacant land. What are we doing? We want to use our facilities, not have them harboured up just for weekend activities. The same at the yacht club. You go down to the end of Sulphur Point. Most days of the week, 2/3 of that's empty. So from Monday to Friday, why not have motorhomers? Or make it available to them and have decent distances between vehicles. The other thing is, we spend millions and millions of dollars on facilities for fishermen. Why don't we treat motorhomers in similar vein? Or use the same facilities to better use? You know, it's not actually creating a new wheel, it's using the wheel we got and just, you know, making a full use of it.
Any further questions, colleagues? I note from District Council days, your colleague Greg Brownless as well.
Hi, Greg. Yeah.
Yeah. So, colleagues, we have one further speaker, Dawn Marshall. Is Dawn available? Dawn, you've been very patient, I see, waiting there. Thank you, Mr. Cantwell. Dawn, if you'd like to come forward, you have 5 minutes allocated, which you can use as you wish. But if you do finish your submission earlier, there may be some questions from my colleagues. So over to you. Thank you.
My name's Dawn Marshall. I live at Mount Maunganui, actually on Marine Parade, which I know is not an area that freedom campers are allowed to park in. However, because it's been voted one of the best beaches in New Zealand by TripAdvisor, or at the best beach in New Zealand, a lot of the camper vanners, particularly the little unself-contained ones, want to park there and get the best view. So my issue is Marine Parade, and I don't have an issue with your current bylaw. You know, I feel it's a good bylaw. We're not camper vanners, and I don't have any issue with the Motor Caravan Association vans. They're never an issue on Marine Parade. What I did want to have a talk about was the implementation of the freedom camping bylaw, particularly signage on Marine Parade. After we, I think it was 3 years ago, the bylaw went through, which banned freedom camping on Marine Parade. The council erected signs on Marine Parade about every 200 or 300 metres, just very small discreet signs that stated no overnight camping, and they worked really well. The number of vans and rental vans just disappeared. Over the next 12 months, the signs also disappeared. And I contacted the council over various emails and phone calls and was finally told that the signs were removed because they confused campers, which was a little bit unusual. So since then, the number of freedom campers on Marine Parade has significantly increased, and I have given you a few photos, mostly taken at 6 o'clock in the morning when I'm running along the road. That is one of my issues. There are a couple of very small signs by Mount Jury, I've noticed. Also of note that on Main Beach there's about 20 signs saying no dogs and no signs saying no camping. So, I mean, along the entire length of Marine Parade, there's other signs for no alcohol, tsunami warnings, there's bus stop signs just been erected, street signs. So very easily, the little tiny no camping signs could be put back up. Also, we wondered whether on the approach to Tauranga, on the main roads, whether there was some, I don't know how you'd do it, some phone number or 0800 number or website that freedom campers could ring or have a look at to see where they were allowed to go. But as we find, they want to go where the best view is, not to Bay Park or other places where they're not going to see the water. The other issue that we have is policing of the bylaw. We understand as security firms employed to patrol the areas in Tauranga and the Mount, and I have been told they only do one patrol per night. So if camper vanners come after they've done their patrol, then they're not caught. So you know, if they've done their patrol at 10 o'clock at night, then the Freedom Camper gets to park without being caught. I think that this needs to be increased, particularly on weekends and public holidays and over the summer. And we believe that some nights on Marine Parade that the patrol's not done at all. I did report in November a blue van with a surfboard on top with a couple of occupants, and they slept on Marine Parade for 2 weeks. Every night they just moved themselves along to obviously where the best surf break was, and it wasn't until I reported it to council with a photo of the number plate that the next night the security firm moved them on. They then subsequently went into Murakata, into one of the side roads, and parked from then on in. Last Friday night, an unself-contained van parked in a reserve near our home. They parked at 9:30. 7 o'clock the next morning, they're still there, and the man got out, went and relieved himself in the sand dunes, and drove off. And obviously no patrol had been done on Friday night. So yeah, I'd like to urge the council to reinstate the signs on Marine Parade and to increase patrol. That's all I've got to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Marshall. Any questions from council colleagues? Councillor Brown.
Comment that they do go out at 10 o'clock at night and they are patrolling right through to 5 a.m. in the morning across the whole city. But
yeah,
the staff are sitting here, so they've listened to your concerns. Thank you.
Question from me, just in regard to those signs.
Yes.
Do you recall whether they were saying something like no camping or no overnight camping?
No overnight camping. They had a caravan or a motorhome and a line through it. I was told they confused the campers, and therefore they went and parked in all the other side roads, because they thought if they weren't allowed to park on Marine Parade, then it must be legal to park in the side roads. That was the excuse I got told.
Thank you. We'll look into that that issue, and we'll consider your submission with the other submissions we've received and make a decision in May.
Thank you.
So thank you for coming in and speaking to us. Colleagues, that concludes the Policy Committee for today. We will adjourn this committee until 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. We'll see you then. Over to you, Councillor Brown.